Yes guys, just a quick one on blending things out and working down through your saturated pots. So when you're building out shading, it's important to remember not to come down your light washes too soon, because you can end up looking like you've shaded a really solid piece, but then when it heals it's going to be really light and look almost washed out and faded. So when I'm mapping things out and getting all the initial shades embedded into the sections, I'll ensure that I'm using almost my full black or my 50% wash, and I'll be getting all these different shading sections initially mapped in, and then as I move down the pots I'll be feathering out the shading. So at this stage now I'm blending things off and I'm checking the design and making sure I'm happy with all the sections, happy with all the shading to make sure there's no patchiness in it. So I'm just really smoothing things out and finessing the shading. When I'm at this stage of particularly a face, it's important that I'm studying the reference image, making sure there's nothing I've missed, or making sure I've not done any of the shading too light and might need going back over and developing a little bit more. So this is the last sort of blend where you're really gonna make everything come to life. Generally I build up the whole face or whatever tattoo I'm doing in layers. So I'll work all my saturations, working in my full black, then I'll move down to my 50% and I slowly come down the pots. Whenever I go back up the pots to a darker wash, it's usually when I've seen something I might have missed or might need to go a bit darker than I thought it did initially, and that's why you're building out the design slowly. Certain things like simpler tattoos, you can kind of hit the shading in one go, but when you're developing a portrait, you should always build it up slowly and let it progressively come together. So at this stage I'm working in a pot that's got a few drops in, and then I've got a second pot with around 30%, and I'm dipping between the two as like my final blend off pot. When we talk about pressure as well, at this stage I'm kind of softening my touch on the skin. When I was getting my other shading in earlier on, I can be a little bit firmer and a bit more direct to make sure the ink's getting in the skin. At this stage I'll soften my touch and everything will be sort of really careful now, making sure that I'm putting the shading exactly where it needs to be. Last thing you want to do at this stage is accidentally slip and put some shading in too harshly. So you can see me moving around a lot. I'm revisiting so many different sections on the face, and it's because every time I go over a little bit, I'll look back at the reference image and then I'll move on and I'll kind of come back to it. So that when I've done another section of shading and I give it a clean, I've got a new perspective on it. I can see if there's anything that needs tidying up, anything that needs developing more. So everything's really progressive. Particularly on a portrait, I think if you are doing a face or anything like that, that's much more important to get all these blends correct than, say, something simpler. The directions you shade as well, guys, is an important one. So I'm not always shading in the exact direction the shading's developed. Sometimes I'll contour around shapes. So, for example, I might shade off towards the nose like this for a few passes, and then I'll contour round the eye and develop that round there and drag sort of the shading round. How's the camera quality looking? Sweet, yeah? Okay. So almost like at this stage when you do a little bit of shading, it's very subtle. Anything you've put in won't make too much of a difference, but what it is doing is it's smoothing things out. Because I'm being so careful in the application of it, I'm not sort of dragging or ragging the needle into the skin. This is on the chest, this, guys. A lot of it with how the customer's sat is it's being stretched for me, but you do need to make sure you're stretching the skin correctly as well. See what I was saying about directions before? I'm sort of visiting things in loads of different directions. You okay, brother?
Yeah, man, I'm good.
Nearly there, mate. Yeah, so tips from this one to take away more than anything, guys, is being mindful not to come down your saturated pots too fast. Be confident with your darker pots to sort of allow them to get the ink in where it needs to go in, and then use your lighter pots to blend off. Because the last thing you want to do is come right down to your light pots straight away. Look like you've shaded a really solid piece, and then when it heals it looks like it was done years ago, the tattoo. So do see that quite a lot as well with new artists. They're sort of hesitant with the darker pots because they're scared of making it too dark. Another thing as well, particularly with like a face, is just stick to what you can see. You should never just try and make up a bit of shading on the cheek or anywhere like that, because it can make it just look completely different. That's where when you're drawing the stencil, a lot of the time, when I'm hand drawing the stencil, I'm studying the design and looking at all the features. It just helps when I get going with the tattoo to work out where all the shading needs to be. With machine speed as well, put sort of work on a machine speed that suits you. I'm using 8 on this machine, but I do swap about. Sometimes it'll vary between 8 and sort of 6.5. But that's with my machine. It depends what machine you're using. Give that a go, guys.